Early in the pandemic, I had some vision that my family might spend the time playing the board games we hadn't gotten to yet, learning them, testing them, seeing which ones we loved, and learning the card games I played in my childhood. Of course, the reality of learning at home and working at home has been somewhat different for us. Instead of hours playing Monopoly and Life and teaching the kids canasta, there's been way more screen time and video game time than I would prefer. And yes, in theory, that is within my control, but it doesn't always feel that way. And yes, we didn't need to get a Nintendo Switch about a year ago as something to do at home during the pandemic, but we did get one. I grew up with Nintendo, and I take some delight in my children spontaneously singing the theme song from Super Mario Brothers. But I also get down on myself, and then the kids themselves worry about what too much screen time will mean for their brains and their social lives. We keep trying to limit it or keep it somewhere in the realm of not the absurd. But it is also true that screens really have been something of a lifesaver during the last strange and unexpected year and a half. And so I think about it a lot, and we talk about it a lot, and I had a realization the other day. It came as I reflected on something that one of my children said as he talked about this particular Nintendo game we've been playing called The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Now, for any of you who don't know the Zelda franchise, in it, Link, the hero, is attempting to save Princess Zelda. The first version of the game for use on a Nintendo console was released to United States users in 1988. I remember playing it back then. Assuming we'd finished our homework and anything else we needed to do, we were allowed to get out the Nintendo and play. And Zelda was fun. The graphics were two-dimensional and boxy back then, but we thought it was incredible. Over the years, other editions have come out with increasingly accurate imagery and with more complex storylines. The version we're playing now was released 4 years ago, and it is bananas. My father and I share an account and we play it together because that's what we did when I was young. And then my oldest has an account of his own and he plays that one. Basically, you control Link as he gets stronger and acquires resources, and as he recaptures, in part by solving puzzles, machinery that in the world of the game is both sacred and technologically advanced. Inside the world of the game, there's no separation between what we might deem the religious or spiritual and the electronic and technological. They are together. The game is intricate with beautifully rendered images, and the storyline is an epic tale of good and evil. It's interwoven with tales of friendship and love and power. And the ultimate goal of the game is to save the world from the tyrannical entity known as Calamity Ganon. You come to the aid of Princess Zelda, who has been holding back the evil all on her own with her spiritual and mental powers. It's actually an awesome game, and it takes strategy and forethought and a lot of commitment because you fail often and you have to try again and again to make the necessary progress. So one day we were walking, and my oldest, who's been reading the very thick definitive book on the game and looking up strategies on the internet and drawing pictures of the characters, we're walking and he says to me, "I think playing Zelda is making me better at sticking with things and that it's building some confidence in me." And we talked about how that might be true, that the growth mindset of the character in the game and the need for resilience in a world gone mad are all skills transferable to real life. I think in part he sensed my fear that screens are unequivocally bad, though we know and he knows that most things are neither all good nor all bad. And I think he was kindly trying to give me something to hang my hat on in allowing him to play. He was helping me see some good in the gaming he's doing. And so on the one hand, that conversation had the intended effect and soothed a part of my anxious that my kids are drowning in screens heart. On the other hand, I was reminded of something my colleague, the Reverend Craig Schwallenberg, once said, that it's enough for something just to be fun. that not everything must result in the creation of a product or the achievement of some identifiable goal. Sometimes it's enough that we wanted to do something and enjoyed the doing, right? He didn't need to have a sort of moral outcome of his play. And that's a lesson I want my children to learn. I, as much as anyone, fall prey to the American idea that everything must have a purpose. And if I had some sort of voice altering machine, I would make that a booming, echoing purpose in all caps. Last week, we talked about how even the idea of self-care has come to be purpose-driven, quantifiable, measured against its efficacy. This massage must relax me for the next week, and if it doesn't, then it wasn't worth it, even if I enjoyed it in the moment. We're so steeped in a mindset of progress and product that we often struggle to live right now and let things be what they are right now. Of course, there is value in our desire to make meaning of things and make the most of things. Teachable moments and growth opportunities are real and important. But sometimes, maybe sometimes we can stop letting our lives be dictated by what we accomplish, and we can simply enjoy for the sake of enjoying. Part of this produce and achieve and purpose mentality is probably traceable to the realities of survival in times past. But I suspect that a good deal of it can be put on the shoulders of our American forebears who perpetuated a way that became a myth of progress. Whenever I think about this, how we ended up in a place and time when our worth and the worth of the things we do is measured by accomplishment, acquisition, growth. I think about Benjamin Hoff's slim volume, The Tao of Pooh, which maybe some of you have read. In particular, there is one chapter called The Busy Backson. In the actual story of Winnie the Pooh, the animals misunderstand a sign that's supposed to say, busy, back soon, and they read it as Busy Backson. And they think it means that their friend is meeting with someone named Busy Backson. And Benjamin Hoff uses this misunderstanding to talk about the idea of the busy person, always having to do something and be somewhere. He writes about our shared American past. From the miserable Puritan came the restless pioneer, and from him the lonely cowboy, always riding off into the sunset, looking for something just down the trail. From this rootless, dissatisfied ancestry has come the busy Backson, who, like his forefathers, has never really felt at home, at peace. When I first read this passage many years ago, it resonated, and it still does, but I can look at it now with somewhat clearer eyes. I suspect we're all familiar with these archetypes, the miserable Puritan, the restless pioneer, the lonely cowboy. But these archetypes are white, and usually in our mind's eye, men, and they existed and stole and made their way at the expense of and on the backs of enslaved folks and indigenous folks. Those crimes of slavery and conquering committed against members of the human family were also part and parcel of creating this American cultural way. All of it was about acquisition, property, money, greed. All of it was about doing and getting. And to this day, we disproportionately value those who have money and things or create money. To this day, we focus on doing much more than we do on being. And we assume that progress toward more is the most important thing. Even our games involve acquisition, because to play without purpose or gain is what children do. I was thinking this week about all the reality TV show games that we have. Ones I love to watch: cooking shows, Lego building shows, fashion designing shows. All of these are in some ways games for grown-ups, but the purpose is to win money for being the best. We have so successfully monetized and materialized everything. And it becomes a way to then justify adult play. If it's competitive and offers prizes, then it's okay. because God forbid we should behave like children when we are grown and play just for the sake of playing. That piece, that idea about what it means to be grown, we can trace some of that back to that quote from Corinthians about putting away childish things. Be a man, we used to say. Hopefully we don't say that anymore. Grow up, many probably still do say. That's childish. Kids even do that to each other. I'm sure you've seen it. They hit a point where they look at something they once loved, and instead of feeling nostalgia, they try to deny it. That's for babies. That's for little kids. What if instead we looked at all the varied means of play and said, wow, said yes, said, what a wonderful way to be in this world. Even if I choose to play in other ways, I can honor that way of yours. We need that kind of shift so desperately, because that vision of adulthood that puts away childish things, it denies play. It denies the kind of pure joy that comes from playing without an agenda, that comes from running around and tagging our friends and imagining that our couches are rocks in a sea of lava. That vision of adulthood puts us all at risk of being joyless. And it keeps us all confined to a small way of thinking and of seeing the world. And we need joy and expansive and creative thinking more than anything right now. Of course, the somewhat ironic circular truth of it all is that play is a necessity exactly because it always has been and always will be more than just fun. The truth is that play for play's sake is what we all require to be happy and healthy humans. But also when we engage in this kind of play, we're actually laying the groundwork for learning, for justice work, for a vision of a better world, and for love. Shortly after my oldest was born, I read a study put out by researchers from Kansas State University. The gist of the study was that single moms who played with their children, even just a bit each day, had lower stress than other single moms. A summary of the study reads, it's been shown that single mothers often have higher levels of parental stress than married mothers. Single mothers can feel constantly overloaded and overwhelmed at being a parent and trying to fulfill all of their responsibilities. They can feel the constant stress of, how am I doing in my role as a mother? But a higher level of parental engagement can reduce the level of parental stress. The study essentially found that although a single mom might be inclined to try and rest and relax and have quiet time after a long day at work, in fact, the mother's own happiness and rate of stress improved if she spent time, even just a half an hour, playing with her children, even when she was beyond stressed and had no desire to do it. If she did it, even faking her enthusiasm or joy at first, the joy became real and the stress levels lowered. I think often about that particular study. There are days when I do not embrace the truth of it. When I wake up or I get home and I just want to be left alone and I just cannot take it. But I try to remember that study, not as a way of putting one more should on my shoulders, one more must, but as a way of remembering that the joy of play doesn't work only for children to reduce stress, it also works for us grown-ups, and that sometimes we have to fake it till we make it. Our world is hard right now. A series of what we might rightly call mini apocalypses continue to bombard us. We are stressed and there is wild uncertainty, and sometimes we do not feel like playing. I understand that completely. It can be hard to muster the energy to play when the couch is calling or the TV is right there. But in a time of struggle and distance and fear, playing has the capacity to connect us and soothe us and de-stress us. Playing is a way of connecting with others, sharing love for an activity. For all of us, no matter what age we are, play can be liberating. It can take us out of our roles as product and producer and into a place of creative thinking, laughter, silliness, imagination, and cooperation. The UU minister, Reverend Marisol Caballero, wrote a few years ago in a piece called Go Play. She wrote, Sometimes the world seems too heavy to leave the house, let alone inspire moments of joy. But the more I watch the news these days, the more I'm coming to view playing, intentionally seeking joy, as a means of radical resistance. Now, that isn't the definition for play that Google pops up in its dictionary, but it certainly is one we might embrace. Play as intentionally seeking joy. That can be very hard when we feel confronted by grief and catastrophe and the kind of burnout that we talked about last week, compassion fatigue, empathy depletion, and a sense of hopelessness. And yet in those moments, play might be exactly the thing. Play is radical resistance against despair, against the American mentality of acquisition and purpose. It is radical resistance against evil within and without. I now think of play as vital and powerful. And part of why it's so powerful is because at its heart, play is about looking at the world differently. You may remember back to our sci-fi month last spring, when we talked about how science fiction, far from being escapist, is about engaging directly with the possibility of the world. There's a theologian, Courtney Goto, who works on play as a religious practice and tool, and she writes this: to play is to experience losing and finding oneself in engaging reality and one another as if, exploring freely a world of possibilities bounded by structure that facilitates relationship. Goto argues that play is exactly about seeing this world as it is and imagining how it could change, how we could be different in this world together. It's quite a theology, really. Rooted in play and imagination and creativity, we observe the world around us, the pain and uncertainty, the harm and potential, the balance of joy and sorrow, and we invent games and create worlds and use them to try out new ways of being ourselves and new visions of what might yet come to be in our world. So, you can imagine some of my surprise as I have thought this week about play and have realized that embedded in this Legend of Zelda game that we are currently playing by means of the technology that I worry about my children overusing, embedded in this game is an extremely important lesson. We can view technology, screens, if deployed properly, as a tool in the development of our spiritual and religious lives. In Zelda, the ancient technology, as it is called, reminds me that in a creative, world-building and world-saving game, my children and I can deepen our sense of what it means to seek justice, to see the world differently, to try on new clothes and attitudes and ways of moving through the world. And this is true of game playing in general, not just role-playing video games. Those possibilities are there when my twins leap around the house pretending to be lemurs for an hour, or when I walk on the sidewalk edge and pretend for just a moment to be a tightrope walker 100 feet above the ground. Play, real play, not those activities we wish we could classify as play, but real play that engages our imaginative minds and asks us to participate actively in creation and problem solving. That kind of play can change our whole lives by taking us outside the box of what is and enabling us to imagine what is possible. My friend and colleague, the Reverend Schwallenberg, reminds us that we are not the first to understand this deep truth. He writes, "Playing isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's important to our mental, physical, and spiritual health. It helps transform our negative experiences. It reduces stress, connects us to others, teaches cooperation. It fosters creativity, flexibility, and learning. It teaches us perseverance, and it makes us happy." And sadly, watching TV and surfing the web aren't really play, at least not when talking about the health benefits. But play, fun, is a part of life. It feeds our soul. All religions recognize the value of play. Schwallenberg goes on, Jesus liked to go fishing, Buddha liked to laugh. Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, said, "Let the children play, for there is vastness in Islam." And he encouraged adults to participate in activities that brought strength to the body and delight to the soul. We humans have had the ability to play forever, and we have known the value of play forever. All play opens our worlds in ways we can't even predict. It's not something children need and do. It is something we all need and do. It's like a spiritual practice. Play is ancient wisdom. Play lets us think beyond the bounds of what we know, outside the reality we are taught must be. Play reminds us that life is about living, not acquiring. Play is about joy in the face of disaster and struggle. Play is resilience and resistance. It's relationship and connection. And play lets us make something extraordinary out of the everyday. Play is love, a cultivated love for life, for what might be, for each other. I know it's hard, but as we move through these last weeks of summer, my challenge to you, my invitation to you is to play. Go outside, have a dance party in your living room, or pretend your broom is the microphone and lip sync from your couch. Get out the deck of cards, the board games, or the old gaming console. Use 2 pens to tell yourself a story. It might feel silly at first, but press on. Let the spirit of play overtake the embarrassment we've been made to feel as playful adults, and just enjoy some time of creativity and imagination and fun. Be the kind of grown-up that Lengel describes, joyful, aware, and full of wonder. May all our days include time for play. May fun be one of our tools for the resistance, leading to the radical changes needed to bring about a world of compassion and care and love. So may it be.